Hi, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been part of our community for a while, I want you to know something right from the beginning: your brain is not the problem. You are not broken. If you've ever thought, why can I understand English but still struggle to speak fluently? I want you to stop blaming yourself. What you're facing is completely normal, and the good news is, your brain is actually built to learn languages. Yes, really. The science is on your side. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where you knew exactly what you wanted to say in English, but when you tried to speak, it felt like your brain froze? Like your mouth knew the words, but something just stopped everything? Maybe it happened during a job interview, a video call with a friend, or even while ordering food in a restaurant. That strange feeling, that block, is more common than you think. And today, we're going to explore the reason behind it. I want to make this episode feel like a deep breath. I want you to relax and know that what you're experiencing is not a failure. It's not because you're not smart enough, or because you didn't study hard enough, or because you're too old to learn. The truth is, there's a system in your brain that controls how you process and produce language, and if we understand that system even a little, we can work with it, not against it. This isn't just another English lesson. This is something different. We're going to look at what fluency really means from a brain-based point of view. And I promise you, it's not about speaking fast or perfectly. It's about clarity. It's about comfort. And more than anything, it's about confidence. You don't need to know every single word in English to be fluent. What you need is a new relationship with your own mind. And that's exactly what we're building together today. I've worked with so many English learners around the world, and again I see the same pattern. People understand a lot of English. They can read it, they can listen to podcasts like this one, maybe even watch movies with very little trouble. But when it's time to speak, suddenly their brain gets in the way. That moment is the moment I want to help you with. And I want you to stay with me until the end, because what you'll learn today could completely change how you practice English from now on. Here's a little hint: fluency isn't about what you know in English. It's about what your brain can access in real time, under pressure. And that's a totally different skill from memorizing grammar rules or learning vocabulary lists. It's a skill that anyone can train, including you. Your brain already has the tools, it just needs the right signals and practice to use them effectively. But before we go deeper, let me ask you one more question. Have you ever thought, I'll never sound fluent because I didn't grow up speaking English? That thought is a lie. And it's a very popular one. Fluency isn't something you have to be born into. It's not a special talent given only to some people. It's a process of training your brain to feel safe and ready when speaking English. That's it. And once you start practicing with that understanding, you'll begin to notice real progress. Not just in how you speak, but in how you feel when you speak. So, let's make a deal. If you've been putting pressure on yourself to be perfect in English, can you just let that go for the next few minutes? Instead, listen with curiosity. Be kind to yourself. Imagine that your brain is a team that wants to help you succeed, it just needs a little support and training. And that's exactly what we'll talk about today. This episode is going to give you something practical. Not just theory, not just ideas, but real, simple things you can start doing today. You'll learn about how your brain processes language, how to reduce the stress that blocks fluency, and how to build new habits that lead to automatic speaking. And the best part is, you don't need a lot of time. You don't need to change your entire life. You just need to shift how you think about practice and progress. Before we dive into the heart of this episode, I want to take a moment to say something important. If you've been enjoying our podcast and learning with me, please take a second to like this episode and subscribe to our channel. That one small action helps us grow and reach more English learners around the world. Maybe someone out there feels stuck and alone right now, just like you did once. And by supporting this channel, you help us reach that person and give them hope. You don't have to do this journey alone. That's what the English Talk community is all about. We're a global space where it's okay to make mistakes, where progress matters more than perfection, and where we all help each other speak a little more freely every day. So hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let's grow this community together. Now, before we get into the techniques and stories, let's pause for a second. I want you to take a deep breath. Inhale. And exhale. Good. You are exactly where you need to be. You're not late. You're not behind. You're learning. You're growing. And I'm here to walk beside you on this journey. Today, we're talking about the science of fluency, but we're also talking about the heart of fluency. That's what makes this special. So stay with me, keep an open mind, and get ready to look at English in a way you've never seen before. Let me tell you about Layla. She's a 29-year-old architect from Paris, brilliant at what she does, confident in French, her native language, and more than capable in English, at least on paper. She had studied English throughout school and university, passed international exams with high scores, and could read technical articles with ease. Her vocabulary was impressive, her grammar solid. But something happened when she had to speak. Every time she walked into an international meeting, whether it was with clients in London or collaborators from Berlin, something would change inside her. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Her brain, so full of words and knowledge, suddenly went quiet. Blank. Silent. Layla described it like this: "It's like I can hear myself thinking in English just seconds before the meeting starts, but as soon as someone speaks to me, it's like the language disappears." And maybe you've felt something similar. That strange disconnect between what you know and what you can actually say when it matters. Layla told me she felt embarrassed, frustrated, and even ashamed after every meeting. Not because she didn't understand, but because she couldn't respond in real time. She'd leave the room thinking, "Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I speak up?" I knew the answer. But in the moment, her mind simply shut down. So we started digging into what was actually happening. Not from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity. Because Layla didn't have a language problem, she had a brain response problem. Her experience wasn't about English, it was about how her nervous system reacted to pressure. What we learned together was powerful. When the brain feels threatened, even by something like the fear of judgment or the pressure to perform, it activates a stress response. That response sends signals to the amygdala, one of the brain's emotional centers, which in turn reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is exactly where your working memory lives. That's the part of the brain that holds and manipulates language in real time. So when stress hits, the very part of your brain that you need for fluent speech becomes less accessible. You still have the language. It's still there. But your brain says, "Not now, we're in danger," and takes resources away from calm thinking and puts them into survival. It's the same reaction you'd have if a wild animal were chasing you. But instead of a wild animal, it's the fear of making a mistake in front of others. That fear feels just as real to your nervous system. And that's why Layla's mind went blank. The first thing I shared with Layla was simple: you're not alone. This is not a personal flaw. This is biology. And once we started looking at her experience through the lens of the nervous system, she stopped blaming herself. That shift opened the door to change. We didn't start with more grammar exercises or longer vocabulary lists. We started with breath. You might think, breathing? Really? But yes, breathing is the key to unlocking the brain in high-pressure situations. When you breathe deeply, And intentionally, especially using your diaphragm, you signal to your body that you are safe. You activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest, recovery, and, most importantly for English learners, access to language. One technique we practiced together was called box breathing. It goes like this: inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4. Simple, structured, and surprisingly powerful. Layla began doing this before every meeting. Not for 10 minutes, not even for 5. Just a few slow breaths. She grounded herself by placing both feet on the floor, sitting upright but relaxed, and breathing with intention. That simple habit sent a message to her brain: you're okay. You're not in danger. And with that message came access. She started to speak, not perfectly, not always fluently, but with more ease. The words began to come back. The long pauses disappeared. And most importantly, the panic was gone. After a few weeks, she didn't just feel more confident, she was more confident, because her brain had proof that she could survive those moments. She learned that fluency is not only about knowing the right words, but about staying present. Enough to use them. We also practiced short sentence starters she could rely on when she felt nervous. Phrases like, "Let me explain my point," or "I believe the best option is," helped her begin speaking without needing to construct a perfect sentence from scratch. These anchors gave her a path forward, even when she felt uncertain. Layla's transformation didn't happen overnight. But every time she paused to breathe, every time she allowed her body to calm down before speaking, she was rewiring the connection between stress and language. She was building a new association in her brain: speaking English is safe. Speaking English is possible. Speaking English is something I can do. This wasn't about tricking her mind. It was about teaching it. She didn't need more pressure. She needed permission to slow down, to make space for the words she already knew, and to trust that her brain could deliver them if she stayed calm. And it did. So if you've ever felt that mental freeze, if you've walked into a conversation and suddenly forgotten everything you've learned, I want you to remember Layla. I want you to know that this reaction isn't weird. It's not a failure. It's your brain protecting you. And with a few simple tools, like breathing and grounding techniques, you can train your brain to stay open and present, even under pressure. Fluency isn't just about practice. It's about access. And sometimes the path to fluency isn't louder, faster, or more perfect. It's slower, quieter, and more mindful. Layla didn't need to become someone else to speak English fluently. She just needed to learn how to stay connected to herself. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you speak English. Not in a complicated, scientific way, but in a clear, simple way that helps you understand why some things feel easy and others feel frustrating. You see, most learners think that speaking fluently is only about how much vocabulary they know, or how many grammar rules they remember. But that's just one part of the picture. Fluency is not just a language issue, it's a brain issue. And when you understand how the brain supports fluency, you begin to practice differently, more effectively, with less stress and more purpose. When you speak English, your brain is doing something incredibly complex in just a few seconds. It has to find the right words, put them in the right order, pronounce them clearly, and make sure they match the situation you're in. All this while keeping up with the conversation. That's a lot. But your brain is made for this. It has systems built specifically for this kind of work. And 3 of those systems are especially important for fluency: memory, attention, and auditory processing. Let's start with memory. More specifically, working memory. This is the part of your brain that holds on to pieces of information while you're using them. Imagine you're about to say, "I went to the market yesterday to buy some apples." Your working memory holds that whole sentence while you speak it. It remembers what you're talking about, keeps the verb tense correct, and helps you finish the sentence smoothly. But if your working memory gets overloaded, maybe because you're nervous or distracted, then you lose pieces of that sentence, and it comes out broken or incomplete. That's not a sign that you don't know English. It's a sign that your working memory got overwhelmed. Now let's talk about attention. Attention is what helps you focus on the conversation and ignore everything else. It's the filter that says, "This is important. Focus here." When you're speaking English, your attention helps you listen to the other person, plan your response, and monitor your own words at the same time. If your attention is pulled in too many directions, like worrying about your accent or what the other person might think, it becomes harder to speak clearly. That's because your brain can't focus on too many things at once. One way to make speaking easier is to train your attention to stay on just one thing at a time. That could mean focusing only on finishing your sentence or only on expressing your idea clearly, without worrying about perfect grammar. The third system is auditory processing. This is how your brain hears, interprets, and responds to sound. It's what helps you understand spoken English and match the rhythm, tone, and stress of the language. If your auditory system isn't well trained in English, then speaking can feel disconnected or robotic. But the good news is that auditory processing can improve quickly through listening practice. When you listen closely to native speakers, notice their patterns, and repeat those patterns yourself, you're training your brain to speak more naturally. All of these systems, memory, attention, auditory processing, work together like a team. And like any team, they work better when they've trained together. That's why speaking fluently doesn't happen just by memorizing words or watching grammar videos. It happens by activating and strengthening these systems again and again in real situations. It's about wiring the brain to respond automatically in English. And that wiring takes practice, not just any practice, but practice that is active, consistent, and kind to your brain's natural rhythms. Here's something important I always remind my students: the brain learns best in small, repeated steps. It doesn't need you to study for 5 hours in one day. It needs 5 minutes every day where you speak out loud, listen with attention, and notice how your brain feels during the process. Fluency grows through repetition and feedback. And that feedback doesn't have to come from a teacher. It can come from your own awareness. Each time you say a phrase, each time you pause and restart, your brain is learning. Even the mistakes are part of the training. Another powerful thing to understand is that your brain loves patterns. It looks for them all the time. So when you give your brain simple, repeated sentence patterns to work with, it starts to recognize and reuse them automatically. That's why sentence starters, conversation scripts, and story retelling are so effective. They don't just teach you words. They train your brain to build full thoughts in English with less effort, and when your brain starts to see English as a familiar system, instead of a foreign challenge, you speak more fluently, not because you've learned more, but because your brain has become more efficient. That's what fluency is. It's the brain working smoothly, not perfectly. It's your thoughts flowing into words without panic or hesitation. And that's not magic. It's not talent. It's the result of training the systems that support language. If you've ever felt stuck, it might be because your practice was only focused on knowing the language and not on using the language through brain-friendly habits. I've seen learners with smaller vocabularies speak more fluently than those with larger ones, simply because their brains were trained to focus, to hold information, and to respond without fear. That's the shift we want. Less pressure, more repetition. Less focus on correctness, more focus on clarity and comfort. Your brain is your partner in this journey. It's not working against you, it's doing its best with the signals you give it. If those signals are stress, fear, or perfectionism, the brain protects you by shutting down or slowing down. But if those signals are safety, encouragement, and curiosity, your brain opens up and supports your fluency. You don't have to fight it. You just have to understand how it works. So the next time you practice English, remember, you're not just speaking. You're wiring. You're strengthening systems that live inside your brain. You're helping memory, attention, and sound awareness work better together. And that's the real science behind fluency. Not just what you know, but how your brain learns to use what you know in real time. Let's talk about something that plays a huge role in how you speak English, but most people don't even know it exists. It's called working memory. I like to think of it as your brain's sticky note. It holds on to bits of information temporarily while you use them. And when it comes to speaking English, that sticky note is doing a lot of work. You're remembering vocabulary, keeping track of grammar, thinking about what you want to say next, and listening to the other person, all at the same time. It's no wonder speaking can feel overwhelming sometimes. But once you understand how working memory works, you can start practicing in ways that actually support your brain instead of pushing it too hard. Imagine this: you're trying to say a sentence in English. Maybe something simple like, I went to the store yesterday to buy some bread. Your brain doesn't just pull that out as one perfect unit. It holds the idea in your working memory, what you did, when you did it, and why, and then turns it into a sentence, word by word. If your working memory is strong and supported, that sentence flows smoothly. But if it's overloaded or distracted, the sentence might come out broken, or with long pauses, or maybe not at all. This isn't because you don't know the words. It's because your brain's temporary space, the sticky note, ran out of room. Working memory is limited. Even in your native language, there's only so much you can hold in your mind at once. But when you add the challenge of using a second language, that space feels even smaller. You're not only trying to form a sentence, you're also translating, self-correcting, monitoring your accent, remembering irregular verbs, and sometimes feeling nervous on top of it all. That's a lot of pressure on one tiny mental space. So the key is not to make your working memory do more. The key is to make it do less at once, and do it more efficiently. One way to do that is by working with short, repeated phrases. Think of these phrases like tools you can grab anytime. The more familiar they are, the less mental energy they require. They don't overload your sticky note because they're already printed there. You're not building them from scratch each time, you're just pulling them from memory. I always recommend that learners start with simple sentence loops. These are short phrases you can say again and again, changing just one small part each time. For example, take the sentence, I need to buy, you can loop it like this, I need to buy milk. I need to buy a new phone. I need to buy some shoes. I need to buy tickets. It seems basic, but what you're really doing is training your working memory to hold a reliable structure while your brain quickly fills in the new information. That's exactly the kind of training that builds fluency. Another example is the phrase, I'm thinking about, you can practice with, I'm thinking about learning Spanish. I'm thinking about going for a walk. I'm thinking about changing my job. These sentence starters are powerful because they reduce the effort of starting from zero. They give your brain a foundation to work from. And once that structure becomes automatic, your working memory can focus on more important things, like expressing ideas or responding to someone else. You don't need to sit at a desk or open a textbook to do this kind of practice. In fact, the best time to train your working memory is while you're doing something else. For example, when you're commuting to work, waiting in line, or cooking dinner, use that time to repeat your sentence loops. Let's say you're walking through the supermarket. You can silently say, I want to eat pasta. I want to eat something sweet. I want to eat lunch soon. It's light, it's flexible, and most importantly, it's useful. You're turning real thoughts into English, and that's exactly what your working memory needs to get stronger. I worked with a student named Jonas, a sales consultant from Copenhagen, who was very comfortable reading in English but had trouble speaking spontaneously. He said he always needed to build the sentence in his mind first, and by the time he was ready, the conversation had moved on. We started using sentence loops together. Every morning while brushing his teeth, he'd practice loops like "today I'm going to," and "I hope I can." He kept the sentences short, used real ideas from his day, and repeated each one several times with small variations. After just a few weeks, he told me, "I don't need to think as much. The words just come." That's the power of training your working memory. Another great technique is what I call the 3-sentence challenge. You pick one sentence starter, then you create 3 versions of it out loud, using different words or situations. Let's try one now. Choose, "I'm planning to," now say 3 things. I'm planning to study tonight. I'm planning to meet my friend after work. I'm planning to take a break soon. You just trained your brain to build fluency with minimal effort. And when you do that regularly, your working memory starts handling English more smoothly. Here's something else I've noticed. When learners practice speaking silently in their head, they miss the extra step of using their voice, and that can limit their fluency in real situations. That's why even if you're just doing these loops while walking or cooking, I encourage you to say them out loud. Not in a loud voice, just enough to hear yourself. That physical action connects your thoughts to your speech and strengthens the link between brain and mouth. Working memory is not about intelligence. It's not about having a strong or weak brain. It's about how much mental space you have available at the moment and how you use it. If your space is full of fear, overthinking, or perfectionism, it's harder to speak. But if you train it with small, repeatable structures, your fluency grows naturally. You're not forcing your brain, you're preparing it. Giving it patterns. Giving it support. So think of these sentence loops and short speaking challenges as a workout for your working memory. You don't need complex grammar. You don't need advanced vocabulary. You just need space, repetition, and attention. You're not just learning words. You're teaching your brain how to hold those words, organize them, and deliver them smoothly. And that's exactly what fluency is. Not perfect grammar, but reliable expression. Not fast speech, but steady communication. And your working memory is the quiet engine behind it all. Let me tell you about Arjun. He's a 32-year-old software engineer from Mumbai. Like many professionals working in international environments, Arjun had been studying English for years. He read technical manuals in English, watched videos in English, even followed English podcasts during his commute. He understood everything. But when it came time to speak, everything slowed down. His words felt disconnected, and his voice would often come out flat, hesitant, and unsure. He sounded robotic, and he knew it. Arjun wasn't lacking vocabulary. He had plenty. He wasn't struggling with grammar either. He knew the rules. His real challenge was something that a lot of English learners experience but rarely talk about. He was stuck in his head. Every time someone asked him a question, his mind would immediately switch into translation mode. He would think of the sentence in Hindi, then try to convert it into English, word by word, piece by piece. By the time he formed a full response, the moment had passed. He felt left behind in conversations. And more than that, he felt frustrated. When we first started working together, Arjun told me, "It's like I'm carrying a dictionary in my head, and I have to search every word before I can speak." That image really stuck with me because I know how exhausting that feels. Imagine needing to perform live, in real time, with a mental delay built into every sentence. It doesn't matter how smart or prepared you are, if your brain is stuck. Translating instead of expressing, fluency will always feel far away. So we had to break that habit. And not by adding more vocabulary or grammar rules, but by changing how Arjun processed English in his mind. I introduced him to a concept called thinking in chunks. Now, this isn't a technical term, it's a practical one. Thinking in chunks means using groups of words together as fixed expressions, instead of building every sentence from individual words. It's like having building blocks that are already assembled. You just pick the block that fits the situation. For example, instead of translating "I think we should," every single time, Arjun practiced using it as a ready-made phrase. One chunk. Not 4 words. Just one familiar unit. He practiced others like "as far as I know," "it seems like," "I'm not sure but," and "let me check." These aren't advanced phrases. They're simple, everyday expressions. But the difference was, he stopped building them from scratch. He started using them automatically, just like he would in his native language. We also practiced full sentence patterns that matched real situations in his work. In meetings, he often had to explain problems or suggest ideas. So he practiced chunks like "one possible solution is, we might consider, and there seems to be an issue with." At first, he repeated them slowly and deliberately. But as he used them more often, they started to flow. His brain no longer had to stop and translate each part. It just accessed the entire chunk, ready to go. Another thing we worked on was internal speech. I asked Arjun to stop narrating everything in Hindi and try using short English phrases in his mind throughout the day. For example, instead of thinking, "I have to write an email," in Hindi and then translating, he would think directly in English, "Time to write that email. Need to reply to that message. Let's fix that bug." These micro thoughts were not formal sentences. They didn't need perfect grammar. But they trained his brain to use English as a thinking tool, not just a translation target. We built these habits into his daily routine. On his way to work, he'd do what we call the chunk warm-up. He'd repeat 5 or 6 of his most used phrases while walking or driving. "I'd like to suggest, in my opinion, we could try, that makes sense, let me check on that, I'm almost done." He didn't wait for the perfect time to practice. He used the little moments. 5 minutes before a call. 10 minutes while waiting for his coffee. These small, regular doses of language started changing how his brain approached English. About 3 weeks into this routine, Arjun joined a virtual meeting with colleagues from Singapore and the Netherlands. For the first time, he didn't script his answers in his head. He just spoke. He told me later that he still made a few mistakes, but the words didn't get stuck. He felt like he was having a real conversation, not giving a performance. And that feeling, of being present in the moment, of speaking with ease instead of effort, that's what fluency really is. Over time, his speech became smoother and more connected. Not because he learned hundreds of new words, but because his mind stopped translating. He was finally thinking in English, not just about English. And his colleagues noticed. One of them even told him, "You sound more confident these days. It's easier to follow your ideas." That kind of feedback isn't about grammar. It's about flow. And Arjun had found his. What made the difference for Arjun wasn't more information, it was a new way of thinking. He learned to stop overthinking each word and start trusting in his growing collection of chunks. He stopped aiming for perfect grammar and started focusing on smooth communication. He let go of the idea that he had to build every sentence like a puzzle. And as a result, his speech stopped sounding robotic. It started sounding human, natural. His thoughts had space to move. If you've ever felt like you're translating every word in your mind before you speak, I want you to know it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to keep rebuilding your sentences from zero. Start collecting chunks. Find the ones that match your life, your work, your conversations. Practice them out loud. Think them quietly. Repeat them in real moments. And little by little, your brain will shift from translating to expressing. Just like Arjuns did. One thing that surprises many English learners is this: if you want to speak better, you don't need to start by speaking more. You need to start by listening more, and listening differently. That might sound strange at first, especially if you've been told that speaking fluently just takes practice, practice, practice. And yes, practice is important. But the kind of practice that actually changes your brain and builds fluency starts with listening. Not just hearing words in the background, but truly listening, with focus, repetition, and intention, when I explain this to learners, the first reaction is usually confusion. How can listening help me speak? It's a great question. And the answer comes from something fascinating inside your brain. You have a set of cells called mirror neurons. These are the neurons that activate not just when you do something, but when you see or hear someone else doing it. If you've ever watched someone yawn and then suddenly felt like yawning yourself, that's your mirror neurons at work. They create internal simulations of what you observe. And when it comes to language, these neurons play a major role. When you listen to someone speak English, especially with clear pronunciation and natural rhythm, your mirror neurons light up. Your brain doesn't just understand the words. It begins to rehearse them. Even before you say a single word out loud, your brain is already practicing. It's studying the sounds, the pace, the tone, the melody. It's learning what natural speech feels like, so that later, when you speak, your brain already has a model to follow. That's why listening is not passive, it's deeply active. And it's not just about understanding. It's about shaping how you sound, how you pause, how you connect ideas. Your auditory system is constantly collecting data. The more data it has, the more confidently your brain can produce speech that sounds fluid and natural. This is true whether you're just beginning or already have years of experience with English, but here's the problem: many learners don't listen often enough, or they listen without a strategy. They might play a podcast while doing other tasks, or watch a movie with subtitles in their native language, thinking that it will help. While these things aren't bad, they don't give your brain the full opportunity to study English sounds in detail. What really makes a difference is focused, repeated listening. Short bursts, done daily, with attention and curiosity. I always recommend starting with just 5 to 10 minutes a day. Choose a clip that matches your level. Not too easy, but not too hard either. A short video, a scene from a show, or even a podcast episode like this one. Then, listen to the same section more than once. On the first listen, just absorb it. Don't worry about catching every word. On the second listen, try to follow the meaning more closely. On the third listen, pay attention to how the speaker uses their voice. Where do they pause? Which words do they stress? What's the rhythm of the sentence? This kind of repeated exposure trains your auditory system and builds something we call phonological awareness, the ability to hear the subtle patterns of a language. And that awareness becomes the foundation for your own speaking. You start to hear what sounds right and what doesn't. You begin to self-correct, not because someone gave you a rule, but because your brain is noticing patterns. And that is one of the most powerful signs of real progress. One learner I worked with a designer named Mira from Warsaw, had studied English for years but struggled with pronunciation. Her sentences were clear, but her speech had an awkward rhythm. It didn't sound like English. So we created a daily listening plan. Every morning before work, she listened to the same 5-minute interview for a week. She didn't just listen once and move on. She listened multiple times. She shadowed the speaker. She repeated certain lines. She even recorded herself to compare. And slowly, the melody of English started becoming part of her own voice. Mira didn't memorize word lists. She didn't study phonetic charts. She trained her ear. And as her listening skills improved, her speaking followed. Not just in pronunciation, but in timing, in confidence, in clarity. Her voice became more expressive. She started getting compliments from coworkers who said, "You sound more natural now." That shift didn't come from trying harder. It came from listening smarter. I want to emphasize this: your brain is always learning from what it hears. Every time you expose yourself to natural English, especially spoken by real people in real situations, you're giving your brain more input to build from. And the more accurate and engaging that input is, the more useful it becomes for your own speaking. That's why I encourage you to listen to English that feels alive: interviews, conversations, stories. Not just textbook recordings, but real voices, and don't worry if you don't understand everything right away. Comprehension will grow over time. What matters most is consistency. Your brain learns through repetition, not perfection. So if you find a clip you enjoy, use it often. Don't rush to find something new every day. Stick with the same piece for a while. Let it sink in. That's how the auditory system learns, through familiar sounds, repeated exposure, and gentle challenges. Another technique I recommend is echoing. After listening to a line, try saying it out loud with the same rhythm and intonation. Don't focus too much on exact pronunciation at first. Just copy the music of the sentence. That's what your brain is absorbing, the musical patterns of English. And over time, your mouth and your voice will start to follow what your ears already know. If you've been trying to speak more fluently and it feels like progress is slow, take a step back and ask yourself, how much time am I spending truly listening to English? Not just hearing it in the background, but studying it with your ears. If the answer is not much, that might be the missing piece. You don't need to speak for hours to become fluent. You need to listen deeply, even for just a few minutes a day, and let your brain do the rest. Remember, the human brain is wired to learn language through sound. Long before we ever wrote or read, we spoke and listened. That's how children learn their first language. And that's still the most powerful path to fluency for adults. So give yourself that opportunity. Slow down. Listen with care. Repeat what you hear. And trust that your brain is working behind the scenes, connecting the dots and building the fluency you want. Speaking is the final product, but listening is where the real work begins. And if you listen with purpose, if you make it part of your daily routine, you'll start to notice a shift. The words will come more easily. The pauses will disappear. Your speech will carry a natural rhythm. And you'll no longer be trying to sound fluent, you'll simply be fluent, because your brain has heard fluency enough times to make it your own. Let me introduce you to Hannah. She's a 27-year-old marketing assistant from Warsaw, someone full of creativity and energy, always working with international teams and handling social media campaigns for global clients. Hannah had studied English since she was a teenager. Her vocabulary was strong, her grammar was accurate, and she could hold conversations at work without serious communication problems. But still, every time she spoke, she felt something holding her back. It wasn't about making mistakes. It was her accent. Hannah had a strong Polish accent, and even though it didn't stop her from being understood, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She would join video calls and immediately start worrying about how her voice sounded. Do they think I sound strange? Will they take me seriously? These thoughts would run through her head before she even opened her mouth. And the worst part was that she started avoiding situations where she had to speak spontaneously. She felt trapped between knowing English and feeling comfortable using it. When Hannah and I first talked, I asked her how she had practiced speaking before. She told me she mostly read aloud or practiced repeating phrases she heard in videos, but she always did it after the speaker finished talking. She was focusing on pronunciation, but she wasn't connecting with the rhythm or flow of real speech. That's when I introduced her to shadowing. It's a technique that not many learners use consistently, but it's one of the most powerful tools for improving pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. Shadowing is simple in theory. You listen to a native speaker and repeat exactly what they say, at the same time, with the same speed and intonation. It's like trying to become the speaker's echo, not just copying the words, but copying how the words are said, the melody, the stress, the pauses. Your goal is to match the voice, not just the text. And while it sounds a little intense, it's incredibly effective. At first, Hannah was nervous. She said, "That sounds difficult. What if I can't keep up?" And I told her, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start." We chose a short video with clear speech, something natural but not too fast, and she started practicing 5 minutes a day. She'd press play, listen to a sentence, and repeat it at the same time as the speaker, over and over again. She didn't pause to analyze grammar or look up words. The focus was purely on sound. She told me she started doing it while walking her dog in the park. With her headphones in and her phone in her pocket, she'd listen and shadow out loud, sentence after sentence, as she walked. The movement helped her relax, and the routine made it easy to stay consistent. Every day, she practiced with the same clip for several days in a row, repeating it until she could almost predict what was coming next. Within a week, she noticed something. Her mouth was moving faster, more easily. The English sounds that once felt awkward started to feel more natural. She wasn't just repeating sounds, she was training her muscles. Speaking a new language uses different facial and tongue muscles than your native one, and shadowing gives those muscles the repetition they need. It's physical. It's almost like exercise for your speaking system. After a couple of weeks, Hannah started shadowing longer clips, including conversations and interviews. She even started shadowing scenes from her favorite series. She said that after doing this every day, something clicked. She began to recognize sound patterns, not just individual words, but the way native speakers grouped their words together. This is one of the most powerful aspects of shadowing. It teaches your brain and body to move with the rhythm of English instead of fighting against it. As her speech became smoother, her confidence grew. She didn't just feel more fluent, she sounded more fluent. And people noticed. During one meeting with a client from Dublin, the client complimented her on how clear and confident her voice sounded. Hannah told me later, "I couldn't believe it. That was the first time someone complimented my English without mentioning my accent." That moment mattered to her, not because she wanted to erase her identity, but because she finally felt like her voice matched the level of English she had inside her. That's what shadowing did for her. It helped her connect the English she knew with the voice she wanted to have. It helped her stop obsessing over pronunciation and start trusting her ability to sound natural. Hannah kept her routine simple, 5 to 10 minutes a day. Shadowing real conversations, repeating clips, and staying consistent. She didn't need special materials. She used podcasts, interviews, YouTube videos, whatever felt interesting and real. That's something I always tell learners: choose content that feels alive. Don't just repeat textbook examples. Use voices that inspire you, voices you enjoy listening to, because your brain responds more strongly to emotional engagement. She also learned to let go of perfection. In the beginning, she tried to match every word exactly, and that made her feel frustrated. But after a while, she realized that shadowing is not about getting every syllable right. It's about building flow, building confidence, and letting the sounds become familiar. That's when the real change happened. Her voice became more expressive, her rhythm more natural, and her English more relaxed. So if you've ever felt self-conscious about your accent, or if you've wished you could sound more fluent when you speak, I want you to remember Hannah. You don't need to erase where you're from. You don't need to copy someone else's voice completely. But shadowing can help you train your voice to move more easily in English. It helps you stop hesitating and start flowing. And you can do it anywhere, on a walk, in your room, in the car. All you need is your voice and 5 minutes a day. Your accent is not a problem. Your voice is not broken. But it does need practice. And shadowing gives your mouth the practice it's been waiting for. That's how Hannah found her fluency, not in silence, not in grammar books, but in the rhythm of real speech, repeated day after day, until her confidence became part of her voice. Today I want to talk to you about something that's at the heart of every successful English learner I've ever worked with. It's not talent. It's not having a perfect memory. It's not even about having extra time or access to native speakers. It's the ability to build a small, consistent habit and stick with it. Because when you repeat something regularly, you're not just practicing. You're actually changing your brain. This is the power of repetition. And it's all thanks to something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change, adapt, and reorganize itself. Your brain isn't fixed. It's not stuck in the way it is now. Every time you practice something, especially in a focused and repeated way, your brain rewires itself. It forms new connections. It strengthens old ones. And over time, what once felt difficult starts to feel automatic. This is true in every area of learning, but it's especially true when it comes to speaking a new language. If you've ever thought, why can't I just remember the words I need, or why does English feel so hard to speak naturally? The answer often lies in repetition, or the lack of it. Most learners try to learn too much at once. They cram vocabulary, watch long lessons, and then forget most of it the next day. But fluency doesn't come from big efforts every now and then. It comes from small, repeated actions, every day, even when you don't feel like it. Let me give you an example. I worked with a student named Diego, a mechanical engineer from Madrid. He had been learning English for years but always felt like his speaking wasn't improving. He told me, I study for hours on the weekend, but by Monday, I feel stuck. Again. I asked him what he did on the days between. He shrugged and said, not much. So we made a change. Instead of studying for hours once or twice a week, he committed to 10 minutes of focused speaking practice every day. He created a micro habit. Each morning, while waiting for his coffee, he would pick one phrase he wanted to master and say it 5 different ways out loud. I'm looking forward to the meeting. I'm looking forward to seeing her. I'm looking forward to the weekend. 5 variations. That was it. Just 10 minutes a day. Within a few weeks, Diego noticed something. These phrases started coming to him automatically during real conversations. Not because he studied more, but because his brain had rewired through repetition. That's the beauty of micro habits. They're small enough to fit into your day but powerful enough to make a real difference. When you repeat something daily, your brain begins to treat it as important. It lays down stronger neural pathways. Think of it like walking through a field. The first time you walk across the grass, there's no clear path. But if you walk the same route every day, a trail forms. The more often you walk it, the clearer it becomes. That's exactly how fluency is built. Not through one big moment of inspiration, but through daily footsteps in the same direction. I want to share a few examples of micro habits that have worked really well for learners I've coached. You don't have to use all of them, just pick one or two that feel doable. For you right now, first, the morning loop. As soon as you wake up, before you check your phone or start your day, say 3 sentences out loud in English. They can be about anything: your plan for the day, how you slept, what you're thinking about. The goal isn't perfection. It's consistency. You're telling your brain, English matters. Let's start here. Second, the 1-minute summary. After watching a video or listening to a podcast in English, stop and speak for 1 minute about what you just heard. You don't need notes. You don't need to be perfect. Just talk. Even if you make mistakes, your brain is practicing recall and expression. And that's what builds fluency. Third, the trigger phrase habit. Choose one phrase you want to use naturally, like "it depends on" or "I'm not sure yet." Every time you walk through a doorway or turn on a light, say the phrase out loud. It sounds silly, but it works. The physical action becomes a trigger, and soon, the phrase becomes automatic. I've seen learners use this technique to master dozens of everyday expressions. Fourth, the speaking journal. At the end of each day, speak for 2 minutes into your phone, recording yourself. Talk about your day, what you learned, or how you felt. Don't write anything down. Just speak. Listening back can feel awkward at first, but over time, you'll hear your own progress. You'll start to notice more confidence, fewer pauses, and stronger rhythm. The most important thing to remember is that your brain loves repetition. It doesn't care how advanced your words are. It cares how often you use them. You could learn 50 new words in one day, but if you don't use them again, your brain will let them go. But if you learn just 5 words and use them in conversation every day, those 5 words will become yours forever. That's how memory works. That's how fluency grows, and here's something that helps a lot of learners: make your habit as easy as possible. Don't rely on motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Instead, create a system. Choose the same time each day. Use the same space, the same app, the same notebook, whatever makes it automatic. Remove the need to decide. Just do it. Let your brain fall into the rhythm. Over time, it becomes part of your identity. You don't think, "Should I practice English today?" You just do it, because it's what you do. Neuroplasticity doesn't care about speed. It cares about repetition. Even if your English feels slow or uncertain right now, if you keep going, keep repeating, keep showing up, your brain will catch up. It's always listening. Always adapting. Always building those connections. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep walking the path. Even 10 minutes a day is enough, if you do it with intention. So as you go through your week, think about where you could fit in one micro habit. Just one. Maybe while brushing your teeth, you describe your plans for the day. Maybe while cooking dinner, you repeat 3 phrases you heard earlier. Maybe while walking to work, you shadow one sentence you love from a podcast. These small moments, repeated daily, are how fluency is born. Not in a classroom. Not in a test. But in your everyday life, one sentence at a time. Let me tell you about Luca. He's a university student from Rome, studying international business. Like many students preparing for a global career, Luca knew that speaking English confidently was essential. He had already passed several English exams, and his writing skills were solid. But when it came to speaking, especially in real conversations, he often froze. He would start a sentence, pause, search for words, and sometimes just switch back to Italian out of frustration. What bothered him the most wasn't that he didn't know the words, it was that he couldn't bring them out fast enough when it mattered. He told me that studying English always felt like a huge task. Hours of reading, memorizing vocabulary, watching long videos, all things he believed he had to do to improve. But he rarely saw progress, and that left him feeling discouraged. He felt like his time was never enough, and that English fluency was something reserved for people who had more freedom, more exposure, more talent. It was easy to believe that no matter how much he tried, he just wasn't the kind of person who could speak English naturally. That belief started to change when I introduced him to something incredibly simple, a 10-minute daily self-talk routine. No books. No apps. No tests. Just Luca, speaking English out loud to himself for 10 minutes a day. At first, he laughed. He said, "Talking to myself? Isn't that a little weird?" I smiled and told him it might feel that way at first. But it's one of the most powerful tools to build fluency, especially when you don't have a conversation partner. We started small. I gave him a structure to follow. Start with 1 minute talking about how you feel today, then 2 minutes describing your schedule, then a few minutes telling a short story from your past, and finally a few minutes talking about something you want to do in the future. No pressure. No need to be perfect. Just 10 minutes, once a day, speaking out loud. If he forgot a word, he could skip it or replace it with a simpler one. The only rule was, keep going, and don't stop to correct yourself. At first, it was awkward. Luca told me he would speak in a whisper, not wanting his roommates to hear him. He felt unsure and slow. His voice trembled when he said longer sentences, and sometimes he couldn't think of how to end a thought. But he didn't stop. He made it part of his routine. Every evening, right after dinner, he would go to his room, set a timer, and talk. Some days were better than others, but he kept showing up. Something amazing started to happen around day 10. Luca noticed that the beginning of his self-talk sessions became easier. He no longer needed to think hard about how to describe his day. Phrases like "I had a class this morning," or "I'm meeting a friend later," came out without effort. These were phrases he had used over and over again, and his brain was starting to retrieve them faster. It wasn't about studying harder, it was about building comfort through repetition. By day 20, he started expanding. He tried new topics, like giving his opinion on something he saw in the news or describing a movie he liked. Sometimes he would use simple sentence starters like "I think," "in my opinion," or "I guess," to keep the flow going. He told me, "I'm not translating anymore. I'm just talking." That was the moment I knew his mindset had changed. He was no longer measuring progress by how many new words he learned. He was measuring it by how comfortable he felt using the words he already knew. After 30 days of this habit, we had a short call to check in. Luca looked more confident, even in the way he held himself on camera. His sentences were smoother. His pauses shorter. He still made small mistakes, but they didn't stop him. He wasn't trying to be perfect, he was trying to be consistent. He said, "I used to think I needed to study for hours to improve. Now I see that just 10 minutes a day, done the right way, can make a huge difference." That's the power of self-talk. It removes the fear of judgment. It gives you space to experiment, to listen to your own voice in English, to make mistakes without pressure. And most importantly, it builds fluency where it matters most, in your everyday thinking. Luca wasn't just practicing English. He was turning English into a part of his inner voice. And that's what fluency really is. He also began to notice something surprising. Because he was speaking more regularly, he started thinking in English more often, even when he wasn't practicing. Walking to class, he would mentally describe what he saw. The weather is nice today. That car is going too fast. I'm hungry, maybe I'll get a sandwich. These weren't deep thoughts, but they were constant. His brain had started switching naturally between languages. And the more he used English in his thoughts, the more fluent he felt in conversations. What worked for Luca wasn't the amount of time, it was the intention behind it. He didn't try to do everything at once. He didn't wait until he had more time. He just committed to 10 minutes a day, no matter how busy he was. That habit became a ritual. It became something he actually looked forward to, because it wasn't stressful. It was private, flexible, and personal. He could talk about anything, and there were no rules except to keep going. The truth is, you don't need a language partner to get better at speaking. You just need space, consistency, and a bit of patience. Fluency doesn't come from big, perfect efforts. It comes from showing up every day and letting your brain adapt through repeated exposure. Just like Luca did. So if you've been feeling stuck or overwhelmed, wondering when you'll finally feel fluent, I want you to remember this: your time is valuable, but even a little bit of it, if used wisely, can create massive change. You don't need to wait for the weekend or the next vacation to start improving. You can begin with 10 minutes today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. That's how fluency is built, one consistent step at a time. Have you ever noticed how the way you talk to yourself inside your head affects the way you speak out loud? I want to explore that connection with you today because it's one of the most powerful, yet often overlooked, factors in learning to speak English fluently. We often think fluency is just about vocabulary, grammar, or pronunciation, but there's something deeper going on. Fluency starts inside your mind, with your internal dialogue. What you say to yourself mentally can either open the door to smooth, confident speech or slam it shut. Let's be honest, many of us are our own worst critics. When we speak English, especially if it's not our first language, it's easy to slip into a harsh mental commentary. You might think, I'm going to mess up. What if I sound stupid? Why can't I find the right words? These kinds of thoughts aren't just feelings, they are real signals that your brain picks up on. When your mind judges you so harshly, your brain goes into survival mode. It perceives a threat, and that triggers stress responses. Your heart races, your breathing changes, and your mind freezes or scatters. It's almost impossible to speak fluently when your brain is busy protecting you from imagined danger. I want you to imagine your brain as a car engine. If you constantly pour the wrong fuel into the tank, the engine sputters, stalls, and doesn't run smoothly. Negative self-talk is like putting bad fuel into your brain's engine. But if you switch to supportive, neutral, or encouraging phrases internally, you're giving your engine clean fuel. It runs smoother, and the car moves forward effortlessly. One of the first steps I teach learners is how to become aware of their internal dialogue. This means paying attention to those thoughts that pop up automatically, especially when you're about to speak or when you catch yourself hesitating. Awareness is powerful because you can't change what you don't notice. When you catch a negative thought, you can decide what to do with it instead of letting it control you. Here's something simple you can do right now. The next time you notice a negative thought, pause and mentally say a neutral or supportive phrase instead. For example, if you think, I'm going to make a mistake, replace it with it's okay to make mistakes. This is part of learning. If you hear yourself say, I don't know the words, try I'm learning new words every day. If the thought is I sound awkward, shift it to my accent is part of who I am, and I'm improving. These replacements don't have to be perfect or flowery. The goal is to give your brain a different signal, one that lowers stress. An open space for learning. Why does this matter so much? Because your brain is wired to respond to the messages you send it. When you use supportive self-talk, you activate different neural pathways than when you use judgmental or fearful thoughts. Over time, these pathways grow stronger. This rewiring actually changes how your brain manages speaking in English. It reduces anxiety and frees up cognitive resources so you can focus on finding words, constructing sentences, and engaging in conversation. Let me share a story about a learner named Mia from Seoul. Mia was an excellent student of English, but she was constantly battling her inner critic. Before every meeting or speaking opportunity, her mind flooded with negative thoughts. She told me, I'm always telling myself I'm not good enough, and it stops me from speaking naturally. Together, we worked on identifying her internal negative phrases and replacing them with gentle, realistic affirmations. At first, Mia felt silly talking to herself in this way, but she committed to the practice. After a few weeks, Mia noticed a subtle shift. She started speaking with less hesitation and fewer pauses. Her anxiety during calls dropped because she had a mental tool to calm herself before and during conversations. She no longer felt trapped by fear of mistakes, which allowed her to experiment more freely with her language. This change wasn't about learning new grammar or vocabulary, it was about changing her relationship with herself. Another important part of internal fluency is learning to stay neutral when you feel stuck. Sometimes, you might search for a word and draw a blank. Your first instinct might be to panic or criticize yourself. Instead, try a neutral phrase like I'm looking for the word, or let me try another way. This keeps your brain relaxed and flexible, which helps you recover faster. Neutral self-talk acts like a soft landing, preventing frustration from taking over. External fluency, how smoothly you speak out loud, is deeply connected to this internal process. The two aren't separate. Your brain's internal chatter sets the stage for your vocal performance. If you've ever tried to speak while feeling anxious or self-critical, you know how hard it is to find the right words. But when you feel calm, open, and accepting inside, your words flow more freely. That's internal fluency supporting external fluency. I want to invite you to practice noticing your internal dialogue over the next few days. When you're preparing to speak or practicing English, listen to the thoughts that arise. If you find judgment or fear, try swapping those thoughts with supportive phrases. You might even want to write down a few affirmations and repeat them quietly before you start speaking. This simple mental exercise can make a huge difference in how comfortable and confident you feel. Remember, fluency isn't about perfection. It's about connection with yourself and with others. When you nurture your internal dialogue, you create a foundation of trust and kindness that allows your spoken English to flourish. The words, the sentences, the rhythm, they all come more easily when your mind is your ally, not your enemy. So, as you continue your journey, pay attention to your inner voice. Become its best friend. Speak to yourself with patience and encouragement. Your brain is listening closely. The way you treat yourself inside will shape the way you speak outside. That connection between internal and external fluency is one of the most powerful tools you have to unlock confident, natural English. A lot of people believe that fluency means speaking quickly, as if the faster you talk, the better your English is. I want to tell you today that this is not true. Fluency is not about speed. Fluency means speaking clearly, expressing your ideas smoothly, and being understood without long pauses that break the flow of conversation. It's about communicating effectively, not racing through your sentences like you're in a competition. When I started learning languages. I thought I needed to speak as fast as native speakers to be fluent. But what I discovered was that trying to speak too quickly actually made me less clear and more nervous. My words got jumbled, and I often paused to fix mistakes or search for the right phrase. That created more hesitation and frustration. Fluency is about balance, being clear and natural, not rushing. Your brain needs time to process language. When you listen, think, and then speak, it's normal to have short pauses. Those pauses give you space to organize your thoughts. Long pauses can make conversations awkward, but short, natural pauses are part of real speech. The goal is to keep your communication flowing, not to eliminate every break. Improving your processing speed takes time and practice, but it's something you can develop gradually. One helpful strategy one recommend is practicing with time-limited responses. For example, set a timer for 30 seconds and try to speak about a simple topic, like describing your day or your favorite food. The time limit encourages your brain to process and respond more quickly, without overthinking. At first, it might feel challenging, but as you practice, you'll notice that your brain starts working faster to find words and ideas. Another tip is to use sentence starters. These are phrases that help you begin your sentences without hesitation, giving your brain a small boost. For instance, if you want to express your opinion, you can start with "I think that," or "in my opinion." If you're telling a story, you might use "first of all," or "after that." These sentence starters act like stepping stones, making it easier to get your ideas out without stopping to search for how to begin. Let me share a story about a learner named Samira from Istanbul. Samira was very knowledgeable about English grammar and vocabulary, but she always felt slow when speaking. She told me she would pause often because her brain took time to translate thoughts into English. I suggested she try time speaking practice and use sentence starters to help speed up her thinking process. She started with just 1 minute a day, talking about easy topics, and gradually increased her time. Samira found that using sentence starters helped her avoid hesitation, and the timed practice pushed her brain to react more quickly. After a few weeks, she felt more confident in conversations and could respond more naturally without long pauses. It's important to remember that the goal isn't to speak perfectly or without any mistakes. Fluency is about being clear enough so that your message is understood, and keeping the conversation moving. If you rush too much, your message can get lost. If you hesitate too long, the conversation might stall. Finding that sweet spot takes patience and practice. Also, try to focus on your message rather than your mistakes. If you concentrate too much on being perfect, your brain will slow down because it's busy monitoring every word. Instead, trust yourself to communicate even if your sentences aren't perfect. People understand us better when we speak with confidence, not when we speak quickly but nervously. Another practice that helps improve processing speed is to engage in simple conversations regularly. The more you speak in real life, even with friends or language partners, the more your brain adapts to the flow of natural communication. Over time, your reaction time shortens, and you'll find yourself thinking and speaking in English almost simultaneously. You might also notice that as your vocabulary grows, your processing speed improves naturally. When you have more words and phrases stored in your brain, it's easier to retrieve them quickly. But don't worry if your vocabulary is still limited. Using simple words clearly is better than trying to use complex vocabulary too quickly and stumbling. Finally, be kind to yourself during this process. Everyone learns at their own pace. Some days your speech will be faster and clearer, and other days it might feel slower or more hesitant. That's normal. The important thing is that you keep practicing with intention and don't give up. So, next time you practice speaking English, focus on clarity and smoothness rather than speed. Give yourself permission to pause briefly when needed, use sentence starters to help begin your thoughts, and try time-limited exercises to build your brain's processing speed. Remember, fluency is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with consistent practice and patience. Your voice matters, and speaking clearly will help you connect with others and express yourself confidently in English. I want to share with you the story of Aiko, a nurse from Tokyo, whose journey to English fluency taught her something very important, that pausing is not a sign of weakness, but a powerful tool to speak with confidence. When we think about speaking English fluently, many of us imagine a non-stop flow of words, a fast pace that makes us sound like native speakers. But Aiko's experience shows us that fluency is not about rushing, it's about knowing how to stay calm and focused, even when you need a moment to pause. Aiko was in her early 30s, working in a busy hospital in Tokyo. She had studied English for years, and her reading and writing were excellent. However, when it came to speaking, especially with patients or colleagues from other countries, she often felt overwhelmed. The pressure to respond immediately was intense. She believed that if she hesitated for even a second, people would think she didn't understand or that she wasn't fluent enough. This belief caused her to panic during conversations, and sometimes she spoke too fast, trying to catch up, which only made things worse. Her words would jumble, and her mind would race. When Aiko and I first spoke, she described this constant tension she felt every time she needed to talk in English. She said, "I feel like I have to answer right away. If I stop, even for a second, I think they will lose patience." This is a very common feeling among learners, and I reassured her that it's okay to take a breath, to pause, and even to say "let me think for a moment" if needed. Pausing doesn't mean you are slow or less fluent. It means you are thoughtful and focused. Together, we developed a simple practice to help Aiko get comfortable with pausing. The first step was breathing. When you're anxious, your breath becomes shallow and quick. That affects your voice and your ability to think clearly. I guided her to practice slow, deep breathing before and during conversations. Just taking 1 or 2 slow breaths could calm her mind and body instantly. We also worked on learning to pause naturally. I explained that even native speakers pause regularly to think, to take a breath, or to emphasize a point. Pauses are part of natural speech. They help the listener process what you said and give you a moment to prepare your next thought. We practice this by reading aloud together, deliberately inserting pauses between phrases and sentences. This helped Aiko get used to silence, which had previously felt uncomfortable. Aiko also began using small filler phrases to buy time without losing the listener's attention. Phrases like "that's a good question," "let me see," or "well, I think," became her tools to signal that she was thinking. These simple phrases made her feel more in control and less rushed. She learned that it's better to say something like this than to fill the silence with nervous sounds or to rush into a sentence she wasn't ready for. One day, Aiko told me about a real conversation that was a breakthrough moment for her. She was talking with an English-speaking doctor about a patient's treatment plan. Instead of panicking when asked a question, she took a slow breath and said, "Let me think for a moment." Then she paused, collected her thoughts, and answered clearly and confidently. The doctor smiled and nodded, showing that the pause was completely acceptable. This small moment of calm made Aiko realize that fluency isn't about speed, it's about staying calm, focused, and thoughtful. She started to practice these techniques regularly. During her commute, she would speak to herself out loud, pausing deliberately between ideas. In conversations with friends or colleagues, she consciously reminded herself to breathe and slow down. Over time, her anxiety decreased, and her voice sounded steadier and more confident. What's remarkable about Aiko's story is that she redefined fluency for herself. Before, she thought fluency meant answering immediately, without hesitation. Now she understands fluency as the ability to express yourself clearly, even if that means pausing to gather your thoughts. This mindset shift reduced her panic and improved her communication. I often tell learners that the spaces between words are just as important as the words themselves. Those pauses give meaning, emotion, and rhythm to speech. They allow you to breathe, think, and connect with your listener. When you learn to pause with confidence, you also invite others to listen more carefully. So if you ever feel pressured to speak quickly or fear silence in your conversations, remember Aiko's journey. It's okay to pause. It's okay to breathe. These moments of calm will help your brain catch up, your voice stay steady, and your message come across clearly. Fluency is not a race, it's a conversation, a flow, and sometimes, a thoughtful pause that speaks volumes. I want to talk to you about something that might change the way you practice speaking English. It's the idea of focused attention. And it's one of the most effective ways to help your brain work less and speak more naturally. Many learners try to do everything at once when they speak. They think about grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and intonation all at the same time. This might seem like a good way to improve, but actually, it overwhelms your brain and slows you down. When you multitask during conversations, your brain has to switch rapidly between different kinds of information. It's like juggling too many balls at once, some will drop. This causes hesitation, mistakes, and frustration. Your brain has limited processing power, and when you try to focus on too many things, none of them get the attention they need. The result is unnatural, slow, or robotic speech. I want you to imagine your brain as a spotlight. If you try to shine the light on 5 different things at once, each thing gets only a little light and is hard to see clearly. But if you focus your spotlight on one thing, that one thing becomes clear and easy to manage. This is exactly how focused attention works in language learning. Instead of trying to fix every aspect of your English at the same time, try focusing on just one element during your practice sessions. It could be your intonation, the melody, and rhythm of your speech. Or it could be word order, making sure your sentences follow the natural pattern of English. Or it might be pronunciation of a few tricky sounds. When you focus on one thing, your brain can really notice the details, learn them deeply, and practice them until they become automatic. Let me give you an example. I worked with a student named Emma from London, who was very eager to improve, but felt overwhelmed by all the aspects of speaking she wanted to get right. She told me, "I want to speak perfectly, but I get stuck thinking about grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary all at the same time. It's exhausting." We decided to try a different approach. For 1 week, Emma focused only on intonation. During her daily practice, she listened to short clips of English speakers and repeated their tone and rhythm without worrying about exact words or grammar. Emma was surprised by how much easier it became to speak once she took the pressure off. Fixing everything. She started sounding more natural, even though she wasn't focusing on grammar or vocabulary. The next week, she focused on word order, practicing simple sentences and their correct sequence. Over time, by focusing on one element at a time, Emma's brain built stronger, clearer pathways. Her speaking became smoother and less stressful. This idea of focused attention also works when you practice self-talk or speak with others. Instead of trying to monitor everything you say, choose one goal for your practice. For example, you might decide to pay special attention to your endings of words, making sure to pronounce ed or s correctly. Or you might focus on linking words together naturally, like saying gonna instead of going to. Focusing on one thing lets you improve step by step without feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to do this alone. When you listen to podcasts, watch videos, or attend conversations, you can choose one thing to notice each time. Maybe today you focus on how speakers stress certain words for meaning. Tomorrow, you listen for how they pause between ideas. This focused attention trains your brain to recognize patterns and use them in your own speaking. It's also important to give yourself permission to accept imperfection in the areas you're not focusing on. If you're practicing intonation, don't worry if your grammar isn't perfect. If you're working on pronunciation, don't stress about vocabulary. This helps reduce anxiety and lets your brain absorb each skill naturally. Another benefit of focused attention is that it saves mental energy. When you try to manage everything, your brain tires quickly and your confidence drops. But when you narrow your focus, you experience small successes more often. These successes build motivation and make learning more enjoyable. That I want to encourage you to create short practice sessions where you pick just one thing to work on. It can be as little as 5 to 10 minutes a day. You might say aloud, "Today, I will focus on my intonation." Then choose a short sentence or phrase and repeat it several times, paying attention only to the melody and rhythm of your voice. Notice how this feels different than trying to correct every word. Over time, your brain will integrate these focused skills into your general speaking ability. Just like a musician practices scales one at a time before playing a full song, you can practice speaking skills one by one before speaking more freely and confidently. Remember, fluency is not about perfection in every moment. It's about building habits and skills gradually, giving your brain the chance to learn deeply and efficiently. Focused attention is your brain's best friend on this journey because it reduces overload and increases learning power. So as you practice English, try to simplify your goals. Choose one thing to focus on during your next speaking session, whether it's pronunciation, intonation, word order, or rhythm. Give yourself permission to relax about everything else for that time. You'll be amazed at how much easier and more natural your speaking becomes. Your brain will thank you for it, and your confidence will grow steadily. Speaking English should feel like less effort, not more. When you learn to speak with focused attention, your brain does less multitasking and more mastering. This is a game changer in your fluency journey, and I can't wait for you to experience it. I want to talk about something very important that I hope will change the way you think about learning English. That is embracing mistakes. Many learners feel afraid to make mistakes when speaking because they worry about sounding wrong or being judged. But what if I told you that mistakes are actually one of the most powerful tools you have to grow your fluency? The truth is, fluency grows through imperfection, and mistakes are not your enemy, they are your brain's best friends when it comes to learning. I see this with so many learners. They hesitate to speak because they fear making errors. They want their sentences to be perfect, their pronunciation flawless, their grammar exact. But this quest for perfection can slow down your progress and even block you from speaking at all. The fear of mistakes creates stress, and stress shuts down the parts of the brain that help you think clearly and express yourself naturally. What I want to encourage you to do is to stop aiming for perfection and start aiming for progress. Progress means that you're moving forward, learning, and improving, even if your sentences aren't perfect or you mispronounce a word. Every time you speak, you give your brain a chance to learn and adapt. This is how fluency is built, step by step, mistake by mistake. Let me explain a little bit about how your brain learns through mistakes. When you speak English, your brain is constantly comparing what you say with what you want to say. If there's a difference, a mistake, your brain notices it. This triggers what we can call the error correction loop. Your brain says, "Okay, this wasn't quite right. Let me try a different way next time." This loop is natural and automatic. It helps you adjust your language over time, making your English clearer and more accurate with each attempt. The more you speak freely, even with mistakes, the faster this loop activates. If you avoid speaking because you fear errors, your brain misses out on valuable learning opportunities. It's like trying to learn to ride a bike without ever getting on the bike. You have to practice, fall, and try again. The same is true for speaking English. I remember working with a student named Tomas from Berlin who was terrified of making mistakes. He would practice English for hours but rarely spoke out loud because he was worried about errors. When he finally started speaking more freely, he noticed something surprising. Making mistakes helped him remember better. He would catch himself saying something wrong and immediately think of a better way. His fluency improved faster than when he tried to memorize perfect sentences silently. Embracing mistakes also builds confidence. When you accept that mistakes are part of the learning process, you stop fearing them. This reduces anxiety and allows you to speak more openly and naturally. You become more willing to take risks with your language, try new words, and experiment with sentence structures. That's when true fluency begins to develop. Another reason mistakes are so helpful is that they teach you about your personal learning style. Some errors might show up repeatedly, revealing areas where your brain needs more practice. For example, you might notice that you often confuse verb tenses or struggle with prepositions. This awareness helps you focus your study on what matters most for you, making your learning more efficient. I want to encourage you to create a safe space for making mistakes. Whether you're practicing alone, with friends, or in a class, remind yourself that mistakes are valuable feedback, not failures. Celebrate your attempts and learn from them without harsh judgment. When you speak, focus on expressing your ideas rather than on being perfect. In fact, the fastest way to fluency is to speak as much as possible, freely and fearlessly, even if that means making many mistakes. Each conversation, each sentence, is a step forward. Your brain is rewiring itself, strengthening connections, and improving your ability to communicate. The more you allow yourself to speak imperfectly, the faster you grow. So next time you feel the urge to stop because you think you might say something wrong, remember this: mistakes activate your brain's learning process. They are the signs that your brain is working hard and adapting. Embrace those moments. Speak freely. Make mistakes. And watch your fluency grow through imperfection. As we come to the final part of today's episode, I want to leave you with an important reminder. Your brain was made for this. Learning to speak English fluently is not about achieving perfection or proving how smart you are. It's about creating strong, flexible pathways in your brain that support your ability to understand, think, and express yourself naturally in another language. Your brain is an incredible organ, designed to adapt and grow with practice, and fluency is simply the result of that growth. Sometimes, when we're learning English, we get caught up in comparing ourselves to others or feeling frustrated when things don't come easily. But the truth is, every person's brain learns at its own pace. What matters most is consistent practice and kindness toward yourself. Your journey is unique, and every small step forward builds the foundation for lasting fluency. Remember, fluency is not about being perfect. It's about progress and connection. When you speak English, you're not just sharing words, you're connecting with people, expressing ideas, and opening doors to new experiences. That's the real value of language. It's not about impressing anyone or meeting impossible standards. It's about communication and human connection. I encourage you to reflect on the strategies we discussed today, the role of your brain in fluency, the importance of focused attention, embracing mistakes, learning to pause, and practicing regularly. Think about which one feels most natural or useful to you right now. Maybe it's the idea of pausing confidently before answering, or perhaps it's focusing on one speaking skill at a time during your practice. Try picking just one new practice to add to your routine today. You don't need to do everything at once. Small, consistent efforts create powerful change over time. As you continue your learning journey, please remember to be patient and gentle with yourself. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small, and keep nurturing your brain's ability to learn and adapt. Every conversation you have, every word you say, is another step toward fluency. If you found today's episode helpful, I invite you to subscribe to this podcast so we can keep growing this global community of English learners together. There are many more episodes ahead with practical tips, inspiring stories, and strategies to make English a natural part of your life. Thank you for being here today and investing your time and energy in improving your English. Your brain is ready. Your voice matters, and your fluency will grow with every step you take. Keep speaking, keep connecting, and I look forward to sharing the next episode with you soon.